You can see that behind me here I have a W212 E550, and on the bench here I have a couple of front brake rotors. Now if any of you out there have owned the E550, you probably already know what I'm going to be talking about here. We're going to talk specifically about the front brakes on this car. Now the issues I'm going to address apply to other cars as well, but for some reason these issues seem specific to this E550. Remember, this has a big V8 in the front end. If you look here, you note that this model also has the sport package for the brakes. These are the 4-piston Brembo calipers and the big rotors. So what's the problem? All right, so driving this car, high speed, 60, 70 miles an hour, I hit the brake hard and I notice a funny feel in the brake pedal. Now, you all know if you have a warped rotor, you get this shudder, kind of a back and forth shudder. But this was a little different. It was definitely a shudder, but it wasn't that typical, you know, like your rotors are all cupped. So I brought it in the shop, put it up in the air, and you know, I'm looking at these rotors, and you can tell they're fairly new. There's no lip on the edge. But the more I got into this, the more I became surprised at what I found. When I pulled the wheels off, I immediately looked at the faces of these rotors, and I'm thinking, wow, these don't look too bad. Then I brought out the little dial caliper, checked the runout on these, and the runout was, you know, maybe 1/1000th, or it was well within limits. So I'm scratching my head, and I got to think, well, maybe the shop that replaced these rotors didn't get the rotor torqued up against the hub properly, or maybe there was a lot of rust in there. And you can see these were coated rotors, quote unquote, but they've gotten quite rusty. I think these were replaced about 3 or 4 years ago. So I thought, well, okay, we're going to take these off. I'm going to clean the hubs, and I'm going to clean the back side here, and I'm going to put it back on, and I'm going to recheck runout. I pulled out the brake pads, and I got looking at them, and I don't know if you can see this, but we have cracking all through here, cracking. Look at the cracking right there. Look at the crack right there. And I go, wow, what kind of pads are these? And look, there's the Mercedes Star, and this really shocked me. These are Akebono pads. Now, I've been a fan of Akebono brake pads for years, but boy, this may change my mind. What is going on here? Why are these pads cracked? You know, they've still got more than 50% life left on them. But I noticed this one here had some scoring. And then I went ahead and pulled this rotor off. And you can see from the front, it's not too bad, but I flipped it over here and I go, wow, look at this. We got more scoring on the back side. And if you look closely here, we got some pad that's embedded in these drill holes. Wow. Now, I've been around drilled rotors for years and haven't really seen this before, not to this extent. So I go, well, I don't even think I'll bother rechecking runout here. We got some other issue going. Then I went over, pulled the other side. And when I pull these pads, look at this one. Look at the deep scoring. Look at all the cracks. This one also has cracks, microscopic cracks all through the pad. And I pulled the screw out, pulled it off, and flipped it over, and I go, oh, you got to be kidding me. You know, I'm shocked. Look at all the brake pad material that has been embedded on this brake disc, and look at the extent of your brake pad dust embedded in these holes. Look at this. Some of them I can't even poke through. But this is on there thick, and it's really burnt on. It's not something I can scrape off. I could probably sand it off. I'm sure some of you think, well, why don't you just sand that off and reuse them? Well, there's something else going on here, okay? What in the world is causing this? Then as I got on the internet, started poking around at some of the forums, and I immediately found out that I'm not alone here. This E550 W212 has kind of a notorious reputation for going through rotors. Some people say, well, gee, I put it on 30,000 miles later, you know, I'm getting a shudder. I've never seen this before. Now, I've been around drilled rotors, as I said, and I know some of you are going to say, well, Kent, it's the fault of the drilled rotor. Just put on regular rotors and you won't have a problem. Well, why this model of Mercedes? So I've been pondering over the last few days. I thought I'd put this video up, get some feedback from some of you other E550 owners. Notice that this rear brake disc is not drilled. And you can see the pads are removed. They're getting right down to end of life. There's the sensor, not too long before that's going to be wearing through the brake pad sensor. But take a look at the caliper. See, it's a single piston caliper, and look at how small that piston is. Compare the rear caliper with the front, and you can see it's quite a bit bigger, and if you look at the pistons, there's 4 of them, and even one piston is bigger than the one in the rear. So coming back to this front rotor, a couple thoughts here. Number one, do you realize that if you would have just pulled your wheels off and inspected these rotors, you would have not seen this? You cannot see the back side unless you pull the caliper. So keep that in mind if you're doing a brake inspection. But this here, this section where the pad has lost material and embedded it right in the rotor, there's only one thing that could cause this: excessive heat. It's not going to just rub off on its own. And you can tell how hot this had to be to fuse this, because I cannot even scrape this off. I can't even scratch it. So this material from the pad itself is almost now as hard as a steel. So where am I going with this? Some of you may already realize where I'm going with this, but I have some suspicions. And how am I going to solve this problem? And how are you owners out there going to deal with this if it becomes a problem for you as well? Leave your comments below. And what I'd like to do in this video series is see if together we can figure out what's going on here and how we can prevent it in the future.